In the dimly lit meeting chamber of the Galactic Concord, the faint flicker of crystal chandeliers hung suspended in the air, trembling as if they, too, feared the suffocating tension filling the room. General Vorrak stood at the center, his towering frame clad in shimmering silver-gray scales that glinted under the muted light. His crimson eyes sweeping across the faces of the alien representatives seated around the massive circular table. His fists clenched tight, sharp claws scraping lightly against the metal surface, leaving faint scratches like a silent warning. "Solara," he growled, his deep voice reverberating through the walls etched with the ancient languages of 100 species, "is nothing but a pack of cowards. For thousands of years, they've hidden behind meaningless treaties, empty promises of peace, while we shed blood to keep this galaxy from crumbling under Vexar's claws. It's time they paid the price." Counselor Lyrian, seated at the far end of the table, shifted slightly in her chair. Her jade-hued skin glowed faintly, reflecting the light from her large, pearl-black eyes. A member of the aquatic Elindar race, she was slender, almost fragile in appearance, yet her voice carried an undeniable weight. "General," she said, soft but firm, "we don't know enough about Solara to make such a judgment. They've avoided war for millennia, true, but that doesn't mean they're weak. There's something off about their silence." Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, as if suppressing a dark premonition. Vorrak spun around, his crimson eyes narrowing into slits. "Off?" he laughed, a harsh, grating sound like cracking stone. "I'll tell you what's off, Lyrian. It's off that we fight Vexar, those giant parasitic monsters, living warships with tentacles and black slime, while Solara sits comfortably on their resource-rich planets, mocking us from afar. It's off that the Galactic Concord bears the weight of this galaxy on its shoulders, while those humans trade and negotiate to save their cowardly hides." He slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot, startling several delegates. "It's time to force their hand. Either they stand with us against Vexar, or we crush them and take what's theirs." The chamber fell into a ripple of anxious whispers. The delegates, from the feathered beings of Aerith to the walking stone hulks of Tholgar, exchanged uneasy glances. Vexar was no ordinary foe. They were the galaxy's nightmare, massive biological entities drifting through space, controlling their warships with a terrifying collective intelligence. They didn't negotiate, didn't rest, and every star system they claimed became a dead zone, swallowed by darkness, where the moans of infected victims echoed across radio frequencies. The Concord had battled them for centuries, but each victory came at the cost of millions of lives and shattered fleets. Engineer Zeth, a small creature of the insectoid Zorak race, sat hunched beside Vorrak, his compound eyes glinting with nervousness. His slender legs tapped rhythmically on the floor, a clicking sound like falling rain. "General," he said, his voice quivering, "I've reviewed the data on Solara. They have a large fleet, but it's mostly used for exploration and trade protection. There's no record of them engaging in major warfare for over 1,000 years. The last conflict they had was with the Drenvar pirates, and even that ended in a peace deal before real fighting broke out." He paused, swallowing hard. We don't know what they're capable of." Vorrak tilted his head, baring his razor-sharp teeth. "Don't know?" he repeated, his voice dropping into a menacing growl. "Then we'll make them show us. An ultimatum. Either Solara sends troops to the battlefield, or we invade and take everything, from their resources to their technology. I don't care how many trade ships or fancy words they have. If they won't fight, they don't deserve to exist in this galaxy." Before anyone could object, a strange figure glided out from the chamber's shadowed corner. It was Kalith, a prophet of the ancient Vinthari race. Her body hovered a few inches above the ground, her translucent skin revealing faint green energy veins pulsing like tiny rivers. Her eyes lacked pupils, mere white voids. And when she spoke, her voice was like wind whistling through an abandoned wreck. "The darkness will devour the one who stirs it," she whispered, her arms rising as if cradling something unseen. "You knock on the door of the Beneath, and it is heard." The chamber fell silent. A few delegates shuddered, but Vorrak only sneered. "More of your nonsense prophecies, Caliph. I don't fear the dark, and I certainly don't fear those feeble humans." He turned to Szeth, barking, "Prepare the message. Send it across every frequency, every language Solara understands. They have 3 days to respond, or our fleet moves into their space." Szeth nodded, though his hands shook as he typed commands into the console. As the signal went out, a strange hiss crackled through the speakers, like a distant sigh. The chamber's screens flickered, and for a split second, a distorted image appeared, a faceless figure, mouth gaping in a silent scream, before vanishing. Szeth yelped, dropping his device to the floor, while Lyrian clenched her fists, whispering, "What was that?" Vorrak frowned but showed no fear. "Just interference," he said, though his voice faltered slightly. "Ready the fleet. If Solara refuses, we'll show them the Concord doesn't bluff." But as he turned away, a chill ran down his spine. Not from the room's air, but from something deeper, as if someone, or something, was staring at him from the shadows. 3 days passed in oppressive silence, as if the entire galaxy held its breath awaiting the Solara Empire's reply. On the command bridge of the warship Clithera's Fang, General Vorrak stood motionless before the main screen, his crimson eyes fixed on the pitch-black expanse beyond. His silver-gray scales shimmered under the faint blue glow of the control panels, but his fists clenched tight, claws scraping the metal railing, leaving small scratches as signs of his impatience. 3 days, he muttered, his voice a low growl of menace. "If they don't answer, I'll tear that cowardly empire apart myself." Counselor Lyrian stood a few steps away, her slender hands clasped together, her jade skin flickering faintly as if reacting to the tense atmosphere. "General," she said, soft but tinged with unease, "we've had no signals from Solara space yet. No fleet movements, no defensive messages. This isn't normal." She paused, glancing at Engineer Szeth, who hunched over a console, his insectoid legs tapping incessantly on the deck. "Not normal?" Vorrak spun around, baring his sharp teeth. "I'll tell you what's not normal, Lyrian. It's not normal for an empire claiming to be civilized to stay silent after an ultimatum from the Galactic Concord. They're trembling, cowering on their wealthy planets, hoping we'll overlook them. But I don't have time for games." He slammed his hand onto the railing, the sound echoing across the bridge, making a few officers flinch. "Szeth, anything from the listening posts?" Szeth looked up, his compound eyes glinting with worry. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, "nothing. No military signals, no encryption, not even routine trade chatter." "But—" He paused, swallowing hard, his legs tapping faster. "There's something strange. The posts near Solara's border report whispers, not radio signals but actual sounds, echoing through space. We can't pinpoint the source." "Whispers?" Vorrak's eyes narrowed into slits. "What nonsense are you spouting, Szeth? Space is a vacuum. Sound doesn't travel." "That's what I don't understand, sir," Szeth replied, his voice cracking. "But the pilots at the border station say they heard it. Overlapping voices, like hundreds speaking at once, but no one can make it out. One went mad, locked himself in an isolation pod, and refused to come out." He bowed his head, muttering, "I've checked the data and something's wrong." Before Vorrak could snap at him, a piercing screech blared from the main console. "Incoming signal from Solara!" an officer shouted, hands trembling as he input commands. The bridge fell silent, all eyes turning to the screen. Vorrak stepped forward, his grip tightening, as if bracing for an unseen enemy. "Open the channel," he ordered, his voice low but sharp. The screen flared to life, but instead of a fleet or a diplomat, as they expected, it displayed a simple line of text, spoken by a cold, synthetic voice. "We agree. Be ready." No explanation, no terms, no threats, just 3 curt words, resonating through the speakers like a lingering whisper. Then the screen went black, leaving the bridge in stifling silence. Vorrak blinked, his confidence wavering for the first time during the meeting. "What is this?" he roared, turning to Szeth. "This isn't the response of cowards. What game are they playing?" Szeth shrank back, his compound eyes wide. I don't know, sir, but the signal didn't come from a single ship or planet. It broadcast simultaneously from every point in Solara space, like their entire empire spoke at once." He shivered, his voice fading. "And there's more. When it arrived, sensors picked up a weird energy wave. Not standard tech, but like something alive." Lyrian stepped forward, her hands clenching tighter. "General," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I told you. Solara isn't as simple as we thought. They're not silent out of fear. They're silent because they're hiding something." She glanced toward the bridge's shadowed corner, where Kay-Leith hovered, her white eyes glowing brighter than usual. The Vinthari prophet drifted closer, her voice like wind through desolate corridors. "The Beneath has awakened," she whispered, her arms rising as if cradling something unseen. "You've knocked, and it has heard. The whispers are its breath, and it draws near." She tilted her head, a strange smile curling her lipless mouth. "Solara doesn't fear you. They fear what they've roused." Vorrak whirled around, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. "Enough of your gibberish, Kay-Leith," he barked. "I don't care about darkness or prophecies. If Solara wants to join us, fine. We'll use them to crush Vexar. But if this is a trick, I'll make sure not one of their planets stands." He turned to Szeth. "Analyze that signal. Find out what they're hiding. I want to know what we're up against." Szeth nodded, though his hands shook as he bent over the console. As he began typing, a strange hiss echoed. Not from the speakers, but from the space around the bridge. Lyrian flinched, peering out the massive window of Clithera's Fang. Outside, the stars blinked unnaturally, opening and closing like invisible eyes watching them. "General," she whispered, her voice faltering. "Do you hear that?" Vorrak frowned, listening. At first he heard only Szeth's tapping and the low hum of the ship's engines. But then it came. A faint sound, like hundreds of overlapping whispers, reverberating through the warship's metal hull. Not through speakers, not over radio, but from the space beyond, piercing the impossible vacuum. "Be ready," the voices murmured, repeating, growing louder each time, like a warning or a threat. Szeth looked up, his insectoid face paling. I see it," he stammered, pointing at the small screen before him. On it, his own reflection stared back, but his compound eyes were blank white voids, his mouth twisted into a crooked grin. He screamed, dropping the device to the floor, while Vorrak stepped forward, his fists clenching harder than ever. "What the hell is happening?" he roared, but deep within, a coldness crept in. Not anger, but fear, a sensation he hadn't felt in centuries of command. Lyrian placed a hand on Szeth's shoulder, trying to calm him, but her gaze locked on Kay-Leith. "Tell us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is the Beneath?" Kay-Leith tilted her head, her strange smile widening. "It's what lives at the core of all things," she replied, her voice echoing as if from a distant place. "It's the darkness beneath planets, the whisper in your dreams. Solara caged it, and now you've called it forth. And it's hungry." She drifted toward the window, her white eyes peering into the void. "Be ready," she repeated, and this time the stars outside seemed to blink in sync with her words, as if laughing. Vorrak stood frozen, his breathing heavy. He didn't want to believe it, but the whispers lingered in his ears, each word stabbing at his confidence. "Ready the fleet," he ordered, his voice hoarse. "If Solara wants war, we'll show them the Concord doesn't fear." But as he turned away, a shadowy form flickered past the window. Not a ship, not a star, but something vast and unseen moving in the dark. And for the first time in his life, General Vorrak felt control slipping from his grasp. The space around the rendezvous point turned oppressive, as if the darkness had thickened into an invisible liquid, choking the light from the Galactic Concord's warships. Hundreds of vessels, from the sleek destroyers of the Aerith to the hulking flying fortresses of Tholgar, formed a tight formation, their plasma engines casting a brilliant streak across the endless void. General Vorrak stood on the command deck, his crimson eyes scanning the main screen, where dots representing his fleet blinked steadily. But outside, the stars flickered erratically, like unseen eyes opening and closing, and he couldn't shake the chill crawling down his spine. "They said, 'Be ready,'" he muttered, his voice thick with suspicion. "So where are they?" He turned to Counselor Lyrian, who stood beside him, her hands clasped tight, her jade skin flickering faintly in the tense air. "Lyrian, what game do you think they're playing? Hiding or gearing up to strike?" Lyrian didn't answer immediately. Her large eyes were fixed on the bridge's massive window, where the darkness of space seemed denser than usual. "I'm not sure, General," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "But if Solara were as weak as you think, they'd have surrendered the moment they got our ultimatum. Their silence, then that brief reply. It's not fear. It's more like confidence." She paused, glancing at Calith, hovering in the bridge's shadowed corner, her white eyes glowing like ghostly flames. Before Vorrak could reply, a shrill screech erupted from the main console. "Incoming signal!" an officer shouted, hands shaking as he entered commands. "From Solara!" The screen flickered, and this time it wasn't a lifeless text. A middle-aged woman appeared, her silver hair tied back tightly, clad in a black uniform edged with red. Her eyes were cold, emotionless, yet there was an eerie allure in her rigid posture, like a living statue. Behind her, the bridge of a warship materialized, but its design was unlike anything the Concord had seen. Curved, organic walls pulsing like living skin, with red energy conduits running like veins. "I am Admiral Ilara Voss of the Solara Empire," she said, her voice calm but sharp, slicing through the air like a blade. "We've arrived, as promised. Prepare to face Vexar with us." No greetings, no elaboration, just a terse statement, as if she were commanding rather than announcing. Vorrak tilted his head, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Arrived?" he echoed, his voice low with doubt. "I don't see your fleet, Admiral. Or did Solara send just one ship to mock us?" He sneered, but the smirk couldn't hide the unease seeping into him. Ilara Voss didn't respond immediately. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile curling her lips, though it never reached her cold eyes. "Look closer, General," she said, and as if on cue, the main screen of Clithera's Fang blazed to life. Sensors screamed in chaos, and Zeth, hunched over his console, yelled, "They're here! Hundreds of ships, no, thousands! They just appeared! From nowhere!" Vorrak whipped around, his hands gripping the railing as he peered out the window. Outside, the darkness of space cracked open, as if an invisible curtain had been torn apart. From those fissures, the Solara fleet emerged. Not the sleek, elegant warships the Concord imagined, but angular machines coated in organic hulls that pulsed like living flesh. Each ship bore strange contours, as if forged from bone and meat rather than metal, with massive cannons jutting out like spines. They moved in eerie unison, silent. No engine roar, no plasma glow, just a deadly stillness, like a pack of predators stalking prey. "By the gods," Lyrian whispered, her hands trembling as she clutched the railing. "This isn't a trade fleet. This is something else." She turned to Szeth, still cowering beneath his console, his compound eyes wide with terror. "Szeth, analyze them. We need to know what we're dealing with." Szeth nodded, but as he typed, the screen before him flickered oddly. I can't," he stammered, his voice breaking. "The sensors can't get a clear reading. They've got energy, tons of it, but it's not plasma or nuclear. It's like something alive, pulsing, like a heartbeat." He paused, swallowing hard. "And the whispers are back. The sensors are picking up sound from them, even though they're not broadcasting." Vorrak turned back to the screen, where Ilara Voss sat motionless, her cold eyes staring through him as if she could see past Clithera's Fang's hull. "How many ships did you bring, Admiral?" he asked, forcing his voice steady. "And why didn't we detect you until now?" "We brought enough," Ilara replied, her tone flat. "And we didn't want to be detected, so you didn't see us. Vexar is a formidable enemy, General. We believe in thorough preparation." She paused, her faint smile widening slightly. "You'll see us in action soon." Before Vorrak could respond, a shout rang out from an officer at the bridge's edge. "General, there's something in the signal." All eyes turned to a secondary screen, where Ilara Voss's image lingered. But behind her, in the shadows of Solara's bridge, a massive shape moved. Blurred, formless, just a black mass with two faintly glowing spots like eyes. It glided past and vanished, but the whispers returned, louder now, piercing Clithera's Fang's speakers like an impossible wave of sound. "Be ready," the voices repeated, overlapping, moaning, like thousands of trapped souls. Szeth stumbled back, his insectoid legs twitching. "I hear it," he screamed, clutching his head. "It's in my mind. It knows my name." Lyrian rushed to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, but she too felt a chill sweep through her, as if someone stood behind her, murmuring in her ear. Vorrak spun back to the screen, his crimson eyes blazing with anger and doubt. "What are you doing to my ship, Voss?" he roared. "What game is this?" Ilara tilted her head, her smile unchanged. "No game, General," she replied. "We're just preparing. Vexar is closing in, and we'll show you what Solara can do." The signal cut off, the screen going black, but the whispers persisted. Not just from the speakers now, but from the space around them, from the deck, the walls, the darkness beyond the window. Lyrian looked outside and screamed. The stars no longer flickered. They'd vanished entirely, replaced by a thick void where Solara's ships hovered like phantoms. But in that darkness, she saw something move. Not a ship, not a star, but a pair of enormous eyes, faintly glowing, opening and closing, as if space itself were alive and watching. Kalith drifted forward, her voice a chilling prophecy. "The Beneath has come," she whispered, her arms rising to embrace the air. "Solara didn't bring a fleet, they brought it." She tilted her head, her strange smile widening. "And it's hungry." Vorrak clenched his fists, his claws digging deep into the railing, leaving gouges. He didn't want to believe it, but the whispers echoed in his ears, and for the first time, he felt real fear. Not of Solara, but of what they'd brought with them. "Ready the fleet," he ordered, his voice rough. "If they're allies, we'll use them. If they're enemies, we'll destroy them." But as he turned away, the massive shape in the darkness flickered again, and he knew that whatever Solara was, they'd changed everything forever. The space around the battlefield turned suffocating, as if the darkness had congealed into an invisible fluid, strangling the light from the Galactic Concord's warships. General Vorrak stood on Clithera's Fang's bridge, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his sharp claws sank into the metal, leaving rust-streaked scratches. His crimson eyes locked on the main screen, where Solara's fleet hung in deadly silence, angular ships with organic hulls pulsing like living flesh, emitting no engine noise or plasma glow. But he couldn't focus on them long. A deep, icy sensation crept through him, as if someone, or something, stood right behind him, whispering words he couldn't grasp. "What are we waiting for?" he growled, turning to Counselor Lyrian. "If Solara wants to prove itself, where's Vexar? Or is this just a show to scare us?" His voice was sharp, but a faint tremor betrayed him. Lyrian didn't answer immediately. Her large eyes were glued to the massive window, where the darkness of space was no longer a mere void. It shifted, writhed, like a colossal living thing breathing. "General," she finally whispered, her voice faltering, "I don't think we'll wait much longer." She pointed outside, and Vorrak turned just in time to see red pinpricks flare in the dark. Hundreds, then thousands, like the glowing eyes of a predatory swarm. "Vexar," an officer yelled from the console. "Enemy fleet detected. They're closing fast." The main screen blazed, showing a crimson cloud surging forward, Vexar's massive bioships, their long tentacles swaying, hulls flickering with green bioluminescence. They didn't move like conventional warships, but glided with terrifying grace, like giant sea monsters in space. Each dripped black slime, leaving trails suspended in the vacuum, and their roars, an impossible sound in space, thundered through Clithera's Fang speakers like the groans of countless tortured beings. "Prepare for battle," Vorrak commanded, his voice booming like thunder. "All ships, take positions. Fire when they're in range." The Concord fleet sprang into action, plasma cannons heating up, their blue glow slashing through the dark. But when he glanced at Solara's fleet, he saw they hadn't budged. Their organic ships remained still, silent, as if waiting. "What's Voss doing?" he roared, slamming the railing. "They're not fighting?" He turned to Engineer Zeth, cowering under his console, compound eyes wide with terror. "Zeth, contact them! I want their intentions now!" Zeth nodded, but as he typed, his screen flickered oddly. I can't," he stammered, voice shaking. "The signal's jammed. Something's blocking it." He paused, clutching his head. "The whispers, they're back. Louder." He collapsed backward, his insectoid legs twitching, and Lyrian rushed to him, resting a hand on his shoulder to steady him. Before Vorrak could bark at him, Vexar charged. The Concord warships opened fire, plasma beams and kinetic rounds tearing through space, slamming into Vexar's biohulls. Explosions flared, blinding light erupting, but Vexar didn't slow. They retaliated with sprays of corrosive acid and spore pods that latched onto Concord hulls, eating through metal like a plague. An Aerith destroyer detonated, debris scattering, and the crew's screams echoed over the comms before cutting out. "They're too strong!" Lyrian shouted, her hands gripping the railing. "We can't hold them off like this!" She turned to Vorrak, eyes desperate. "We need Solara! If they don't join, we're done!" Vorrak gritted his teeth, his crimson eyes blazing with rage. "I don't need those human cowards," he snapped. "We'll crush Vexar ourselves." But as his words fell, a horrific screech rang out, not from Vexar, but from Solara's fleet. He turned, and what he saw froze him. Without warning, Solara's fleet surged into Vexar's core, shattering their deadly silence. Their organic ships flared, not with plasma or conventional energy, but with a pulsing red light, like flowing blood. When they fired, there were no explosions, only a haunting moan, like thousands of trapped souls, echoing through space and piercing Clithera's Fang's hull. Their cannons unleashed red-black beams, not energy, but living tendrils, wrapping around Vexar ships and ripping them apart with terrifying precision. "What are they doing?" Lyrian whispered, her eyes wide with horror. A Vexar ship took a hit, but instead of exploding, it convulsed violently, its biohull tearing open to reveal twisted tentacles, as if reborn into something worse. Its roar turned to a scream, and over the comms, a Vexar pilot, or what had been one, howled, "They're in my head! They know what I fear!" Then the signal died, and the ship crashed into an asteroid, bursting in a cloud of black slime. Vorrak stood motionless, his hands trembling on the railing. "This isn't destruction," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "This is control." He turned to Calith, hovering in the bridge's corner, her white eyes burning like twin flames. "What do you know about this? Speak." Calith tilted her head, her strange smile stretching wider. "The Beneath doesn't kill," she whispered, her voice echoing from afar. "It devours. It takes the enemy's fear and turns it into a weapon. Solara didn't bring a fleet. They brought it." She raised her hands, and outside, in the dark, enormous eyes opened, faintly glowing, staring straight at Clithera's Fang. Before Vorrak could react, a scream crackled over the comms. "General! The Erendor is infected." A secondary screen flared, showing footage from a Concord warship. The crew inside shrieked, smashing equipment, and one, an aerith-feathered being, tore open his own chest, white eyes wide with terror. "They're here," he yelled. "They're inside me." He collapsed, and from his body, black slime oozed, crawling like a living thing. Zeth fell back, his insectoid legs spasming. "It's spreading to us!" he screamed, clutching his head. "I hear it! It's calling my name!" Lyrian rushed to him, but she too felt a chill sweep through her, and for a moment she saw herself in a mirror, her face rotting, eyes blank white, smiling at her. Solara's fleet pressed on, and Vexar, the galaxy's nightmare, began to collapse. But not from destruction. They tore themselves apart, bioships ramming each other in a frenzy, tentacles entwining, black slime spraying. Within minutes, Vexar's fleet disintegrated, leaving a field of twitching debris and ghostly moans. Solara's ships withdrew, their hulls nearly unscathed, the red light fading, but the whispers grew louder than ever. Vorrak sank into the command chair, his breathing ragged. "They knew," he muttered, his voice breaking. "They knew how to beat Vexar. But how?" He turned to Lyrian, eyes full of doubt. "This isn't war. This is something else." Lyrian nodded, her hands trembling. "We misjudged Solara," she whispered, "and now we're in their hands." She glanced at Calith, still hovering in the corner, her smile a warning. Outside, the enormous eyes in the dark closed, but the whispers didn't stop. "Be ready," they repeated, a promise or a curse. The space around the battlefield became a silent graveyard, where Vexar's wreckage drifted in the dark, twitching like abandoned living bodies. Black slime floated in clumps, flickering with faint bioluminescence, and their ghostly moans lingered over radio frequencies, though no ship remained intact. The Galactic Concord's fleet hung in silence, its surviving warships scarred with acid burns and debris, their plasma engines flickering weakly like a dying breath. On Clithera's Fang's bridge, General Vorrak slumped in the command chair, his hands limp, his sharp claws no longer gripping the railing. His crimson eyes stared at the main screen, where Solara's fleet hovered motionless, their organic ships dark as phantoms, untouched. Counselor Lyrian stood beside him, her slender hands shaking as she gripped the railing, her jade skin flickering faintly as if about to fade. "We won," she whispered, but her voice held no joy. So why do I feel like we just lost? She glanced at Engineer Zeth, curled up beneath his console, his compound eyes wide with terror, his insectoid legs tapping a frantic rhythm of panic. Vorrak didn't reply immediately. His breathing was heavy, each gasp an effort to cling to his dwindling confidence. They knew, he finally muttered, his voice hoarse. They knew how to defeat Vexar, not with strength but with something worse. He turned to Kalith, hovering in the bridge's corner, her white eyes glowing like twin ghostly flames. You were right, he said, his voice sinking into bitter resignation. The Beneath. What is it? Kalith drifted closer, her translucent body pulsing with faint green energy veins. It's what lives at the core of all things, she whispered, her voice echoing from a distant place. It's the darkness beneath planets, the whisper in your dreams. Solara caged it, used it to build their power. But when you sent that ultimatum, you woke it fully, and now it's hungry. She tilted her head, her strange smile widening, a chilling prophecy. It didn't just devour Vexar. It'll devour everything, if set free. Before Vorrak could respond, a hiss crackled from the main console. Signal from Solara! An officer shouted, hands trembling as he typed. The screen flared, and Admiral Ilara Voss appeared, still seated motionless in her organic bridge, her cold eyes piercing them. Behind her, the curved walls pulsed like living skin, and in the shadows, a massive shape glided past, blurred, but its faintly glowing eyes made Lyrian shudder. General Vorrak, Ilara said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. An impressive victory, wouldn't you say? Vexar is gone, and the Galactic Concord still stands, thanks to Solara's aid. She paused, a faint smile curling her lips, though it never reached her eyes. We're always willing to help allies in need. Vorrak gritted his teeth, his hands balling into fists. Allies? He roared, his voice thick with suspicion. You call that help? My fleet's infected, my crew's gone mad, and you stand there like nothing happened. What did you do to Vexar? And to us? Ilara tilted her head, her smile unchanged. We did what was necessary, she replied, her tone flat. Vexar was a threat, and we removed it. The method doesn't matter, only the result does. But now, General, we have bigger matters to discuss. She sat straighter, her cold eyes sharpening like knives. This galaxy is in chaos. Vexar was just a symptom of a greater problem: instability, weakness, disunity. Solara proposes a true alliance with the Galactic Concord, under our leadership. The bridge fell silent. Lyrian drew a sharp breath, her hands trembling harder. Leadership? She whispered, her eyes wide with dread. You don't want an alliance. You want domination. Ilara didn't blink. Call it what you will, she said, her voice still calm. But face the facts, General. Vexar fell in minutes under our hand. Your Concord fought them for centuries and couldn't win. We have the strength, the resources, and the will to bring order to this galaxy. All we ask is cooperation, real cooperation, under one command. She paused, her eyes piercing. Or you can refuse. Vorrak shot to his feet, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. Refuse? He bellowed. You threaten us after we fought together? What happens if we say no? Ilara tilted her head, her smile widening slightly, but her eyes were steel. Refusal is your right, she replied. But consider this, General. What you saw today was a fraction of Solara's power. The Beneath has been caged for millennia, but it sleeps no more. We can restrain it or unleash it. We don't want conflict, but if we must, we won't hesitate. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. Imagine what happens if it comes for you. The whispers returned, not just from the speakers, but from the space around the bridge, from the deck, the walls, the darkness beyond the window. Be ready, the voices repeated, overlapping, moaning like thousands of trapped souls. Szeth screamed, clutching his head, his insectoid legs thrashing wildly. "It knows my name," he wailed. "It's inside me." Lyrian rushed to him, but she too felt a chill sweep through her, and for a moment she saw herself, her face rotting, eyes blank white, whispering her name. Vorrak stood frozen, his breathing heavier than ever. He stared at the screen where Ilara Voss sat, her cold eyes boring into him as if she could see through Clithera's fang's hull. "You're threatening us with that monster," he said, his voice rough. "But the Galactic Concord has stood for thousands of years. We won't kneel to fear." Ilara nodded slightly, as if expecting this. "Of course, General," she said. "Discuss it with your allies. Weigh it carefully. Solara will wait." The signal cut off, the screen going black, but the whispers didn't stop. They echoed in Vorrak's ears, in his mind, like a curse he couldn't escape. He turned to Lyrian, his eyes full of doubt and fear, something he'd never shown anyone. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice low, almost a confession. "If we refuse, we face that thing. If we agree, we lose everything." Lyrian clenched her fists, struggling to keep her voice steady. "We misjudged Solara," she said. "They're not weak. They're more dangerous than anything we've faced, even Vexar. But we can't let fear decide. We have to find a way to resist them, or at least survive." Kalith drifted forward, her voice a final prophecy. "There's no resisting the Beneath," she whispered. "It's awake, and it'll feast before it sleeps again. You can only choose, be its prey or serve the one holding its leash." She tilted her head, her strange smile now a curse. "Be ready." Vorrak looked out the window, where the darkness of space was thicker than ever. A pair of enormous eyes opened in the void, faintly glowing, staring straight at him. The whispers grew louder, calling his name. Vorrak, 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 like an irresistible summons. He took a deep breath, his fists clenching tight. "We'll survive," he said, his voice rough but resolute. "Whatever the cost, we'll survive." The Concord fleet began its retreat, the surviving warships drifting silently toward the galaxy's core. But as they left, the darkness seemed to follow, and the whispers never stopped. Solara had shown the galaxy that humanity didn't fear war. They'd simply waited for the perfect moment to remind everyone why they were the most terrifying species in the universe. And now, with the Beneath at their side, no one could predict their next move, or the price the galaxy would pay. As Clithera's fang vanished into the dark, a low laugh rumbled, not from the speakers, not from the ship, but from the space around them. And in the void, the enormous eyes closed, though no one dared believe it truly slept.